When we talk about fighting climate change, we gotta talk about greenhouse gas emissions. Think of these emissions as a puzzle, and to solve it, we need to understand its different pieces.
These pieces are called scopes 1, 2, and 3. They help us track and reduce emissions from different sources. It's like sorting our laundry. We need to understand where the dirt is coming from before we can clean it up.
Understanding these scopes is important for everyone, from big companies to everyday people like you and me. It's about taking responsibility for our impact on the planet.
By understanding where our emissions come from, we can start making smarter choices that lead to a healthier planet. It's all about working together to create a greener and more sustainable future.
Scope 1 emissions are the easiest to understand. They're the emissions that come directly from sources you own or control. Imagine a factory with big smokestacks releasing pollutants into the air. That's a classic example of Scope 1 emissions. These emissions usually come from burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. They're a major contributor to the greenhouse effect, which is causing our planet to warm up. The more we can reduce these direct emissions, the better it is for our environment.
Let's take the example of a company that makes furniture. Their factory uses natural gas to power their machines and boilers. The burning of this natural gas releases greenhouse gases directly into the atmosphere. These emissions from the factory's operations fall under Scope 1. To reduce their Scope 1 emissions, the furniture company could switch to renewable energy sources like solar or wind power. They could also invest in more energy-efficient equipment that uses less fuel. By taking these steps, they directly reduce their contribution to climate change.
You need to hear this if you're a business owner or energy manager. Scope 2 emissions are a little less direct but still important. They're the emissions generated from the electricity, heat, or steam you use. Think of it this way. You didn't burn the fuel to create that energy, but you're using the energy that caused those emissions. For example, if your office building uses electricity from a power plant that burns coal, those emissions are counted in your Scope 2, even though you're not burning the coal directly.
Imagine a big office building in a bustling city. The building uses a lot of electricity to power its lights, computers, and air conditioning. This electricity comes from a power plant that burns coal to generate electricity. The emissions from the power plant are considered Scope 2 emissions for the office building. This is because the building didn't directly burn the coal, but it's using the electricity generated from that process. By choosing renewable energy sources or implementing energy-saving measures, they can significantly reduce their Scope 2 emissions.
Scope 3 emissions are the trickiest to track because they're all about your supply chain and the life cycle of your products. This includes everything from the materials you use to transport your goods to how your products are disposed of in the end. It's about taking responsibility for the emissions you're indirectly responsible for. Think of it like a spider web with your company at the center. All the threads connecting you to your suppliers, distributors, and customers represent potential sources of Scope 3 emissions.
Let's say you run a clothing store. You don't manufacture the clothes yourself. You get them from suppliers. The emissions from those suppliers' factories, the transportation of the clothes to your store, and even the emissions from your customers driving to your store all contribute to your Scope 3 emissions. Even after a customer buys a shirt, the emissions associated with washing and eventually discarding that shirt contribute to your company's Scope 3 impact. It highlights how interconnected our choices are and how even small actions can have a ripple effect on emissions.
Scope 3 emissions often represent the most significant portion of a company's total greenhouse gas footprint. This is because it encompasses all those indirect emissions that are often overlooked. Addressing Scope 3 emissions requires collaboration and transparency throughout the value chain. By working closely with suppliers, encouraging sustainable transportation options, and promoting responsible consumption practices, companies can make a real difference in reducing their overall environmental impact. It's about recognizing that we're all part of a larger system.
Reducing Scope 1 and 2 emissions is about taking direct action within your own operations. Switching to renewable energy sources is a game changer. Instead of relying on fossil fuels, Harnessing the power of solar, wind, or hydroelectricity significantly reduces emissions. Another important step is improving energy efficiency. This can involve something as simple as switching to LED light bulbs or as complex as upgrading to more energy-efficient heating and cooling systems. It's about making your operations leaner and greener. Tackling Scope 3 emissions demands a united effort. It's essential to collaborate with suppliers to foster sustainable practices. Opting for suppliers who emphasize renewable energy and energy efficiency is a significant step. Supporting sustainable transportation initiatives is equally important. This might include optimizing delivery routes, utilizing fuel-efficient vehicles, or considering alternative transportation methods like rail or sea freight. Encourage employees to use public transport, cycle, or carpool whenever feasible. Understanding and addressing all three scopes of emissions is essential for companies to effectively combat climate change. It's not enough to just focus on what happens within your own walls. You need to consider the entire life cycle of your products and the impact of your operations on the world around you. Remember, every action counts. By taking responsibility for our emissions, big or small, and working together to find innovative solutions, we can create a more sustainable future for generations to come. Let's all do our part to keep our planet healthy. Please keep in touch for the next episode of this course series. Also, share the course series and subscribe to Green Planet if you haven't already, and share your questions in the comments below.